Hi, I'm Jordan McDonald, staff writer with GovCIO Media Research, and welcome to GovCast. Today, I'm here with Darnita Trower, former Deputy CIO for Operations at the IRS. Darnita, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And, congratulations on such an amazing career at the IRS. You've done so much work there in terms of helping with filing season, leading the modernization efforts there. Could you, first off, before we get into all of this, just give me an understanding of how you got to the IRS and, your early start with government experience at this agency?
Sure. So we'll have to rewind all the way back to 2010, where I was living in Florida. And, a couple of years before that, I believe we were going through the housing crisis. And late that year, that I had my daughter. And the history that I had was in working in healthcare IT background. So I did a lot of traveling. And once she came along, I thought, no, I didn't want to be a road warrior anymore. So the mix of the housing crisis really pushed me to look towards government. Initially, it wasn't to become an IT executive or leader in the space. It was just a means to an end initially. When I got the role in 2011, moved from Florida to Maryland, and my daughter was 7 months old at that time. She is now 15, so it's been a journey.
Yeah, and so tell me a little bit about this journey. How do you get to Deputy CIO of Operations?
Yeah. So I took a pretty unconventional path in my leadership journey. Again, joining the IRS, I came in with, really not real big expectations of what the journey would look like. So I came into ACA on the coverage data repository team and did that for a couple of years before applying for an executive assistant role in the Deputy CIO Operations Office. I landed there, and very quickly, the boss I had at the time, former CIO Gina Garza, recognized in me that I had a skill to really just understand what was happening, connect dots, and solve big problems. So very quickly, my role changed to her ops advisor. I like to think of it as being the unofficial TMZ correspondent in IT. I knew a little bit about everything, and I, helped to showcase the issues to Gina at the time and solve problems. Now, the biggest thing coming out of that role was having a seat at the table. While I wasn't an official executive, Gina made sure that I was heard. So I think one of the most important lessons learned out of my journey is to look back at the people who are supporting you and ask the one question that she asked me was, what do I think? Critical in my trajectory. And so that's kind of instilled in me as part of my journey, and how to leverage my teams and those around me is to continuously ask, what do you think? Because it's not just the people at the table that have the answers. There are others that you also need to lean on just for their expertise and insight.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned being tasked with solving big problems, and we've heard a lot of different initiatives across government, but especially within the IRS, about driving modernization. Can you tell me a little bit more about your role in helping that, ushering that forward?
Yeah, sure. So after 6 years, spending it in the deputy CIO office and then in the CIO's office, I decided I wanted to move out and make some of these strategic decisions myself. So I went out, and first thing I've landed as a senior manager was standing up SADI, the Secure Access Digital Identity Program, which now protects over 50 million plus taxpayers. That was kind of the start there. And then I landed in a legacy space with our old uh, systems, the generalized mainframe, which or GMF for short, which runs on COBOL on the mainframe. Um, that is where I kind of, I want to say, cut my gums on driving legacy modernization. and not just driving something that was a little more prominent in the leaning forward space. Um, from there, I spent a little about half a year on the business side, which was extremely eye-opening to understanding everything that we do on the IT side. What's really driving that from a business perspective. And then coming back, I got tapped to lead digitalization, which was probably the biggest undertaking I've had at the IRS um, before going into the deputy CIO role. And that was trying to tackle that little problem we have called paper. We had a goal to become paperless, and that's the most transformational program I want to say that I've worked on here at the IRS.
Mhm. Can you tell me a little bit more about that program, understanding the scope and scale of it? How big of an issue is it trying to get rid of paper, and how did you approach it?
Well, it's really big. So I want to say when we started this, I think it was 2022 or 23, and we wanted to get it done in a 2-year effort. Now, at that time, I said, folks, NASA is working on Artemis, and they're going to put another man on the moon by 2025. For crying out loud, we can for sure get rid of paper at the IRS by then, because it's not rocket science. Yeah, so that's how I tried to motivate folks, but the reality, Jordan, it is really really hard. And just to give some kind of context to how hard it is, we have over 1,400 different forms of IRS, 3,600 different types of notices and letters. So when you're talking about trying to make sure all of those things that have traditionally been paper-based and bringing that in and making it electronic, we have done really well in the tax return space. But across our correspondence space, where we get 400,000 pieces of mail per day, it is enormous. It is something that you can't tackle without really engaging the internal stakeholders, owners, and the employees that are going to be driving the work. Again, now that I'm in a chief customer experience officer role, it's always been critical, and even more so now, to ensure that the customer experience is at the forefront of everything you do. And thus, at the IRS, even more critical than to tackle the employee experience, because your customer experience is only as good as your employee experience. So, what you give them has to work. And there are numerous customers at the IRS. In addition, the customers are, this is the one place that I worked where your customers are there for life. They don't really have a choice. So one thing you want to do is make it easy. And so, yeah, it's 2025, and no, the IRS is not done with all the paper. They are not paperless. But I will say NASA has still not gone back to the moon either. They have shifted their date. I think it is okay that the IRS has shifted theirs.
Yeah, definitely. And, that's definitely very true. I want to ask about legacy modernization too. It's something you mentioned, and the
Yes.
scope of that problem as well.
Yes. That so here's the thing with legacy modernization, I think it's a bad rap. I think because yes, some of the systems at the IRS are extremely old. A lot of times you will hear about JFK era technology. But the reality is the technology itself is not, well, I should say the infrastructure is not old, it's brand new. Yes, some of the code goes back to as old as 1962, 63. The great thing is it still works. It's working. It's very secure. Um, but yes, in order to keep up with the times and to move faster and to modernize in other areas, that legacy modernization does still need to be tackled. And as resources are attriting and walking out the door, it's getting harder and harder for us to find folks that know assembly and COBOL. But it's moving forward, and it is, a very interesting journey to be on to actually dive into that and understand how the heart of tax processing works.
Yeah, it's really a massive challenge that it sounds like you dealt with there. Could you help me understand how you tackled those challenges as a whole?
As a whole, well, one, as they say, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time, right? So at any given time on my leadership journey, I was typically focused on a specific problem to solve. And so rallying and getting the right teams around you, again, asking people what they think, engaging with your customer base, those are all pretty critical to tackling those challenges. Um, and then again, when you rise through the ranks and then land in the deputy CIO operations role, those things become even more critical in that play because nobody does these big jobs by themselves. It takes a team.
Mhm. Yeah. And so going specifically to the deputy CIO role, could you help me
Yes.
understand that position? And, once you've reached, I guess, the pinnacle of your IRS career, what did that look like? What were your responsibilities?
Yeah, so the deputy CIO of operations role, again, for me, it was kind of a full circle moment when I was asked to do that back in September. It's like, oh, okay, I'm going back where I started, as an executive assistant. That's really, it was kind of wild to end up back there. The role itself is what it says, right? You pretty much have the entire operational footprint from an IT perspective at the IRS, which is massive. But more importantly to that ecosystem is set up there to run filing season, which is not just a 1 year event. It really runs all year round. So it is a massive undertaking. That is what I was charged with doing in that role. I'd say we had one of the most flawless filing seasons in recent memory. Um, and of course, I stepped into that role at the beginning of September. And then by January, we had an administration change and things just, looked a little different. But the one thing I'm very proud of is that we were able to focus on the mission and stay focused on what our priorities were and what we needed to do to drive the IRS forward and complete filing season almost flawlessly.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about that because you mentioned the importance of one getting the filing season as like effortlessly as possible, the customer experience and the employee experience.
Yes.
Thinking about some of the IRS's initiatives like the Taxpayer 360 plan, direct file, as well as the administration changes. I guess I want to ask how you navigated all these different aspects and components to create like this ecosystem and make sure that the experience is as best as possible for the government, the people who work in the government and the IRS, but also those of us who, pay taxes and have to engage with the IRS for life, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So it's definitely, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it's easy. It's not easy. It's a very large machine, a very large operation. So really understanding where the organization is going and how you're going to get there is critically important. Partnering with industry and other areas. So with direct file, partnering with USDS to drive that forward and deliver something monumental that shifted the landscape for folks who are filing electronically. And then you have like Taxpayer 360, which while not live yet, it's reimagining all the various different customer service screens or the one pane of glass or view into a taxpayer's record. There are again lots of different systems that the IRS has. So bringing that all together in one pane is critically important to be able to serve the taxpayer. And again, it's going to pay dividends in how the employee is using the system.
That's so interesting because, thinking about your, I guess, entire tenure across the IRS from top to bottom, all over from the business side of things to the IT side of things, you've got a very unique window and perspective into the agency that I think a lot of people don't have, whether they work in the IRS or they don't. Um,
Yeah.
could you help me understand that, like, through your experience, what lessons have you learned about the agency that you can, I guess, pull for not only those in the IRS, but government agencies as a whole that are looking to be, more efficient, work better with customers and employees and industry and academia, you name it.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because the landscapes has definitely shifted this year. Things are different. I am feeling for my friends over there at IRS now. as they look forward to the next filing season, especially now that the big, beautiful bill has passed and is now legislation. They will have to figure out how to navigate that new legislation and get it implemented in a very short period of time. So I think some of the leadership lessons that I've learned along the way would go a long way in helping them in this next year and getting this legislation implemented for the next filing season. And I think other government agencies could also take note. And I saw it, Jordan, I said it earlier, looking towards your teams, because a lot of people have left, right? And making sure that you're asking folks, what do they think? And getting different perspectives and giving some of the folks who traditionally would not have a seat at the table a seat at the table. No one succeeds alone. So it's critical that we're doing that now and building the strong teams. I say there's trust. You're going to have to trust in your teams. Trust is a two-way street. So and also trust between the agencies and the public is going to be key here as well. And then you got to be bold. I think for me, that's probably a quality that I have is I'm a risk taker, right? I say, go big or go home. Having a seat at the table really did enlighten me into why we sometimes avoid risks. Nobody wants to be testifying on the Hill. Nobody wants bad press or that you're, having bad audits or managing those press inquiries all day. I've been there. I've seen it. And now I understand it better. But those can't be the reasons why you don't take bold steps to move things forward. Because if you don't, you really don't. It's very slow. You just don't win and succeed. And sometimes, I guess, then probably even more important is that failure is okay if it's small, right? Like, yes, I say that lightheartedly, but IRS and most agencies really don't have the wherewithal to fail. They can't fail. But if you do things small and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and keep moving forward, you'll find success in that.
Yeah, that's great advice. We've seen a push throughout this new administration for efficiency and I guess working and doing more with less resources, less budget, less personnel. You've talked a little bit about some of the experiences you've had and advice for those who are still in government, but you can help me understand how you navigated, I guess, diminishing resources, diminishing teams, and how that can translate for others.
Right. So before IRA funding, for years, the IRS was underfunded and losing resources. So the time that we're in now is not new to the IRS. This isn't the first time they faced scarcity or been forced to do more with less. It's practically muscle memory at this point for the folks at IRS. Getting the IRA funding is like, and now having it taken away, it's like going from feast to famine. But the folks that are left there at the IRS are used to having to make the hard choices. They are used to prioritizing on a daily basis and asking the question over and over again, what would I do with this next dollar? And it means that what you're going to do with it is make sure filing season doesn't fail because they collect over 90% of the revenue for the country. Essentially, they are funding freedom and it cannot fail. So they've done this before. I know they will do it again. They're resilient over there. They'll find a way. And I think they'll take some of those same lessons I've learned and they'll apply it to what they're doing going forward. And other agencies could stand to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Darnita, thank you so much for sharing some of your insights. That's really helpful for understanding the scope and scale of the IRS and then your role in playing and making sure that, we keep having these successful filing seasons. So thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it.